we're kind of selling ourselves down the river, for the mess of pottage, trading our freedoms for that security.
I need to be a voice. If I want to make a difference, I can't just leave it up to other people to go out there and fight for me. No, I have to fight for my children.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Defending Utah Radio and TV. Defending Utah is where we aim to think right and wrong, not right and left. We've got an exciting show today with you, talking to Michelle Tanner, and we will kind of introduce her in a few minutes. Before we get started, we want to make sure that you check out defendingutah.org and also some of the recent YouTube videos that we've done in the last little while, such as the solutions, which should be out hopefully soon, and also on regionalism. Please go to those, the defendingutah.org, and watch those videos. Today, our guest is Michelle Tanner. I've kind of been watching her. One of the things that I noticed is that it was probably back in probably 2020, Cedar, we were holding an event at the same time that Michelle, I think it was part of the organizing of probably what we call a peaceful protest in St. George in front of the hospital there. From there, she ended up winning a seat on the St. George City Council, and she's really grown in popularity in that regards in the liberty movement and trying to protect our freedoms from the administrative state. I know she's a parent and she's a wife, and I think that those are probably the most important jobs that she's probably doing right now. And I think that, and she's also in the medical field. So I think that it's kind of great to be able to get her perspective. So anyway, Michelle, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for having me. I always love to talk about freedom and liberty, and I love that you started out with just talking about how your focus is the local level and how vital that is to really protecting our country and our liberty.
Great, and I appreciate that. And we'll just run with that. So when did you get involved in the liberty movement?
Yeah, so politics has never been my aspiration or anything that I thought that I would ever get into in this type of capacity. I've always, from childhood, my dad was Air Force, and thankfully had parents that taught me the importance of America, and have always been very liberty minded and focusing on the Constitution and those liberty principles that make America amazing. So that's been instilled in me from a young age, but we all get busy with our lives. Like you mentioned, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a family nurse practitioner, so business owner. So I've spent a lot of my time doing those things. And it really wasn't until 2020 when I like to say the silver lining of that is it was a wake-up call for a lot of us who care deeply about this country and our children and the country we're going to leave to our children. And being in the medical field kind of gave me a really unique perspective during that time. I was actually pregnant in 2020, working in the ER. And we didn't really know much about it at the time. I was the first to say, hey, let's be cautious. I was doing all the research I could to figure out what exactly I should be doing to protect my baby, my family, and, while working in this emergency environment. And it really didn't take long to start to realize, whoa, this is not about. They started with the on our elementary children. That was a big whoa. There is nothing that even remotely close should have indicated that on children, let alone the repercussions that we're seeing now from some of those forced And so that's when I really felt passionately and actually had a pretty profound experience of knowing that I need to be a voice. If I want to make a difference, I can't just leave it up to other people to go out there and fight for me. No, I have to fight for my children. And we get so focused, I think, at the corruption and things that go on at the national level and even the state level, but made me realize how vital and important it is that we know what's going on in our own backyard, that we have elected officials here locally and groups here locally who will defend the principles that make this country the amazing place that it is. So that's really kind of in a nutshell what got me involved and realizing how vital it is that come what may, it wasn't popular for me as a medical professional, especially to be speaking out publicly against and healthy elementary children. And I did receive a lot of backlash for that, ultimately being terminated from my position in the ER. But going back, I would do that all over again because it was the right thing. We have to fear God more than we fear man. And that's what I hope we can see even more of in this country.
Well, and I agree, and I appreciate your waking up. We all have that waking up time period, but you mentioned, all the way from protecting our own children, hoping other people will wake up, and that's what we're hoping as well, is by doing these, highlighting, defenders of, true defenders of liberty, such as yourself and others that we're going to have on the show. To tell people that, hey, we're normal people, ordinary people that are living in your community, that we're seeing some things that just don't add up, and there has some psychological effects. I work in the therapeutic field, and I work in a treatment facility, and we just got a new student, and one thing that he told me, he said, he says, I suffer from depression. And I said, well, when did that depression happen? And he said, well, it happened, during the 2020, ordeal. And I said, are you serious? And he says, yeah. He says, I said, are you an extrovert? And he's like, yeah, I guess so. He says, but I was, I couldn't go anywhere. And so at that point I developed depression. And during that time, you were hearing these psychologists and everything's talking about, when you mess people up, you cannot see their nonverbal cues, and that it's going to develop into, these mental issues that the students are going, that the youth is going to develop. And so, it's just kind of interesting, as I was talking to him, he that's one thing that he was talking about. So it just nails what and goes along with what you're saying. So, going back, I mean, I you hit some of the questions that I'd really like to kind of maybe, get, you can go, deeper, or, just, whatever you think, but what are your thoughts on the current healthcare system?
It's FUBAR.
Okay.
It's gone. It's really sad, honestly, for me to have to say that, because that's my background. I've been in the medical field since I was 17 years old, and worked my way up to a graduate degree as a nurse practitioner, to where now I treat patients, I prescribe medications, and I love the medical field, and I loved being in emergency medicine. I was so passionate about emergency medicine. I've worked from the craziest, busiest ERs off the Las Vegas Strip to rural critical access ERs and everything in between. And there's just something about being there for patients in those really vulnerable, important moments of their lives. And to see, I think we always knew there was some level of corruption in medicine, but to see how blatant it was throughout was very, very eye-opening to me. But just seeing how they loosely, with such limited data, would just start these things on people, and all of a sudden, for the first time in history, not be acknowledging natural immunity. Now all of a sudden we're going to put out a narrative that no, natural immunity is not good enough. I mean, none of it made sense logically, scientifically. And just from a freedom standpoint, to try to force these things on people and doctors, that's really what disappointed me probably the most throughout all of this, is we really got to see people's true colors of how they handled this and the inhumanity that we saw with allowing people to die alone and forcing things that we knew were wrong. But it's this fear, right? And that's why I continue to say, fear God more than we fear man, because at the end of the day, it's not these, deep state puppeteers in the background actually destroying our country, even though they are. It's the little Eichmanns that are destroying our country. It's the people who know better and are just carrying it through and saying, oh, I'm just following orders. No, I'm not going to let you in with your dying baby. I'm following orders. Yes, I'm going to force you to get this and not educate you about any risks because I'm following orders and I'm afraid to lose my job or afraid to lose my livelihood. That needs to stop. We are past the point in this country of worrying about losing our jobs or our livelihoods. We have to stand up and just do the right thing.
I couldn't have said it any better. I do think that, like you said, I think we live kind of in an echo chamber. And sometimes I think we are so tied to that paycheck. I was a police officer and I got out of the field and was able to retire and whatnot. But one thing that I could see is that our discretion was being taken away. And I love the people that are in police work, just like you're going to say, you love the people that are, that are in the medical field, you love them. But sometimes you're like, there's something not right here. And you're hoping that they will also go research it and find out too. All you got to do is, it's so important to go back into history and to read and do some critical thinking. And if you do, you almost start to come back to the realization or conclusion that most people are seeing, is that, we're kind of selling ourselves down the river, for the mess of pottage, for, trading our freedoms for that security. And we know, I think it was Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin made some references to that. If you trade your freedoms for security, you deserve neither or, and that's, I think that, I'm really nervous and concerned about, where the direction of our country, and I've gone in and tried to research, the history, our police work or the justice system, and then also the education system, and along with the healthcare, it seems like it's the same kind of corruption that is kind of taken over, So,
Yeah.
so you're totally right, and I appreciate again that you're so caring. I mean, there are so many good people that are out there in these works, or in these fields, and they are doing the great job. But unfortunately, there's policies that are coming from on top that are mandating them that what they can and can't do, and they're taking the discretion and almost taking the humanity out of us, and we're kind of becoming more of the matrix or robot, and it's sad. So kind of on that line, who do you think, who would we blame for the current situation that we're in?
Ourselves. to
I
be
agree.
to be frank, I mean,
Yeah.
how did we get to this point? We got to this point because we are the frogs in the boiling pot of water that didn't, I mean, thankfully now, that's why I say the silver lining of 2020 is some of us saying, whoa, enough, we are done, we are drawing the line, we are getting out of that boiling pot, right? But we still got to this point. And really, that at the end of the day, I do think it's ourselves that we have to blame for getting to this point.
And I agree. I love the boiling pot analogy. It's so it really is an analogy that puts the image in your mind, and you can see it and you can feel it. But you're right. I think we are to blame for it. We are a republic, and during that time, the only way a republic is going to thrive is if the people are all in their communities, are all involved. and putting out, and holding their representatives accountable and not letting it, get away. And that's kind of what we've done is, and I think you mentioned it earlier, we're so busy in our personal lives, and we're so busy in our professional lives that, we don't have time to do that, to go back into politics. And unfortunately, sooner or later, if we're not involved in politics, politics will rule us. And I think that most of us are starting to see that and feel that. And we're like, whoa, we need to push back, and we need to get back to, to holding people accountable for on the constitutional principles. That's so important. So here's another question then: why aren't people getting involved or staying involved? We might rehash that, but what are your thoughts on that? Why aren't people getting or staying involved?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what I've realized, especially now being an elected official for the last year, is how vital it is that people prioritize this in their lives. Because yes, we're all busy. Most of us are parents. Most of us are working, we have to pay our bills. I get that. But at the end of the day, if we don't have freedoms, if we don't have the founding principles that this country was built upon, if we keep going down the trajectory, our current trajectory, none of those other things are going to matter. And so that's one thing I've been really passionate about in my community here in St. George, is encouraging people to show up to city council meetings, because I will tell you, it makes a difference in that room when we're voting. And you can probably attest to this as well. If the majority of people showing up have one viewpoint, more than likely the votes are going to go in that direction, because there's that pressure that we feel as elected representatives that we need to represent the will of the people. And when the silent majority are silent, that does not do us any favors, because we do have a very loud minority. We've also experienced that here in St. George this last year, that, like to be loud and act like they're this large number of people, but they're not. That's not really the will of the majority of the people. And so I think you do still see some people who are not speaking up as much. Some people simply, I think, still do have their head in the sands, which I don't know that there's a lot of hope for them getting their heads out of the sand. I mean, if all we've been through the last 3 years hasn't done it, I don't know that there's much hope for those people waking up. But the rest of us, I think that we are starting to realize the difference we need to be making in our communities, and people are starting to show up more and rally more. And I do like that aspect that we've been seeing more and more the last 3 years, but we need to keep it up, and we've got to get more numbers there.
Yeah, I agree. Numbers are what are the key. And I think that one thing that I'm seeing is education is key to that. And I also think on that line, do you think that maybe they feel overwhelmed? I mean, it's kind of like, when you talk about politics, I think people get that deer in the headlight and they're like, oh
Mhm.
no. And it's like that eating an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a
Right.
time. And I think that some people are so overwhelmed that they're like, oh, I can't, I get stressed thinking about it. I can't do it. And they are just so, like I said, overwhelmed. Do you think that might play a little bit into it?
I do think that can play a role. I also think that a big part of our culture here in Utah, a lot of people grew up with this mentality of, we have to be nice. We
Yeah.
turn the other cheek. We don't want to cause any contention. Contention is of the devil. Well, true
Yeah.
love is truth. And if we're not willing to speak truth and stand boldly for godly principles, for constitutional principles, then we aren't truly doing our duty here. I really, if we want to talk about the battle of good and evil, which is ultimately, I believe, what this all at its core comes down to, we cannot be silent And I hear people say all the time, in fact, just in a meeting yesterday, another representative was accusing me of being uncivil or mean. And I had to stop her and I said, whoa, 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 just because I am boldly taking a stance on something that might make someone uncomfortable because I'm calling out the truth, that's not me being mean. That's not me being uncivil. But a lot of people are afraid to be labeled as that quote mean person, or to lose friends, or whatever it may be. And I think we really just have to get over that in our culture. It's not mean to speak truth. In fact, it's more important than ever that we are doing that boldly.
I love that, truth and boldly, it goes, our boldness, it goes hand in hand right there. Like you said, I mean, the culture also being nice, and I think we have to compartmentalize politics, and we've got to be able to speak truth. And when you're talking about issues, you have to articulate it to a point that it's truth, and truth will hurt. I mean, how many times, I think we've all can attest to this. How many times has somebody gave us corrective feedback and we realize, holy cow, you know what, maybe I did do something wrong and maybe I need to fix it. And you go back and fix it. And all of a sudden, at the moment, your ego and your pride's hurt. But wow, I'm so thankful for those people that would hold me accountable. I mean, I read a quote the other day, and I just the paraphrase is that, we're not holding people accountable for against them, but we're holding them accountable for them, because accountability is love, and being and talking and telling somebody the truth. I'd much rather have somebody tell me a hard truth than a flattery lie, and I think that, like you said, the
Exactly.
culture is all about flattery and telling more lies, or making people feel good. And I'm like, I would rather you tell me the truth. Let me think about it, and then let me change my ways and do better. So I commend you, and it sounds like the way you handled that other elected official, was speaking in boldness, and even in the LDS culture, and even in the Christian culture, any religion or any philosophy, they talk about talking the truth with with boldness. So there's nothing, you're not trying to hurt people's feelings. Again, you're trying to care. So I appreciate that. Couple other
I
questions.
think you did
Oh,
hit another, no, not to interrupt, but I think you
do
did
it.
hit another important point though, with the, people also feeling overwhelmed, and that barrier. And I think that piece right there is why it's so important that we are getting more organized on our side of things, because the other side tends to be organized. They tend to have a lot of funding behind them. And that's really been lacking on our side of things. And so the more organized we can become on our side, and also, just recognizing, kind of back to, my wake up call of when I was feeling so helpless in 2020 of, I'm just one person, what can I possibly do? And I was feeling overwhelmed. The impression that came back to me was, it's the local level. These
Yes.
issues, while they may seem like they're national big issues, they start and they end at the local level. And now more than ever, we have to be safeguarding our local communities and physically gathering together and organizing here, because I do think we're going to see a day in my lifetime where we're going to have to really hold the line. I mean, we're already seeing it to an extent, but we're going to really have to hold the line in our local communities on these principles.
I think that another part of that is being overwhelmed is, I don't know what to do. And so they're like, hey, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I think right now, like you said, the other side is very well organized, well funded, and we're just starting to wake up. And now all of a sudden we're like, okay, what can we do? What do we do? And so sometimes we have to, sometimes you're accused of putting the cart before the horse. And then, I read another quote, and it basically says, sometimes, life is, sometimes it's throwing you the test first and then the lesson afterwards, and that's kind of where it is. And so I think coming back, the locals are the solution. And one thing that I'm really excited about this next Defending Utah video that's coming out is that Enoch Moore, I think it was last Thursday, he brought in a solution, and it's basically the local levels, and it's the committees of safety. And I think it was Chris Ann Hall that I was watching a video on her, and she was saying that in order to understand the contract, the Constitution, what we've got to do is we've got to go back to the meeting of the minds. And for me, I've been studying the Constitution for 25, well, no, probably since probably about 30 years, and every year I'm learning something new. And so when I go back to the meeting of the mind, now I've realized that we've got to read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers to understand. It's kind of the yin and the yang, I mean, they're trying to tell you, hey, you've got to have it balanced, and if it gets off balance and offset, we've got some solutions here for you to do if you'll read and understand what we were trying to do. And so I think that's so critical, is that we've got to get back to the history. We've got to get back to our founding of the country and why it was founded, and the purpose of the Constitution, to do away with, the divine rights, and that all men are free, and I think that what a document, because it built upon all these declarations, build upon one another, and the solutions, and Enoch Moore will talk about that in the next video. So when it comes out, I highly recommend you to watch it. But I think the local levels, we're already doing a lot of the things. We're just trying to gain momentum and traction. And in the meantime, we might be called different names, but I think that we need to stay the course, and I know that it's the right thing to do. So kudos to you. So here's another question for you. Being in local government, what are your thoughts on federal grants and subsidies?
Yeah, so this is always one that I just have to smile when people will say, especially when we're doing our local budget here, oh, no, it's okay, that's not coming from our budget, that's a federal grant. Oh no, that's a state grant, that's free money, right? Like, no, there's no such thing as free. At the end of the day, it's still coming from our tax dollars, whether it's our city taxes, our state taxes, our federal taxes, right? So somebody's paying for it, and it's always coming with strings attached, because nobody's just giving you a handout, a grant, without anything attached to it. So I do believe that it's important that we are staying as independent as we possibly can from state and federal funding. So I'm not a big proponent of accepting many of those grants. So I do think that's important that we are evaluating. And that's a question that I ask whenever it's presented of, hey, we have the opportunity to get this grant. It's okay, what are the strings attached? What do we have to do in order to get that money, right? So we've got to be looking at that closely.
And I agree. The states are the ones that produce stuff. It's not the federal government. And the federal government has enumerated powers that they're supposed to be tied down to, and they're not doing that. And so basically all of this money from the states go to the federal government, and then the federal government hands it back out, like you said, with strings attached. I always think of Gulliver's Travels, and there's a picture of him, and he's laying down, and all these the little people have him tied down and binded with all these cords. And if you only have one of these cords or two, you can break them, but pretty soon, you can see on the picture, they've got him from head to toe, and he's bound, and he's not able to get, even though it's a little string, now all of a sudden he's not able to advance, and he's not free. And I see that that's one thing that with the federal grants and taxes and or the subsidies and state tax or subsidies, like you mentioned, that's what it's doing. So I appreciate that you're seeing that. I just, it's unfortunate because it's a culture and it's the echo chamber. Hey, everybody else is doing it. We might as well do it. We might as well get the free money. If we don't get it, somebody else is going to do it. And then plus, it's like you just inherited all these other federal grants and subsidies and all these strings attached that have been already put upon you as a city council member, in 2023 that has happened, back in, 1990, I mean, and so it really is, I don't think people realize that's probably an insidious way of the federal government tying the states and locals' hands. I wish more and more people understood it, but I'm so glad that you fight it or push against that. How important are property rights?
That is one of our most basic functions of government, right? To protect life, liberty, and property. And property rights is one that, we lose that, we don't have America. We have to have property rights. And this is actually a discussion that I have frequently, especially in local government, because there's always that balance, right? And my philosophy is you have private property rights. Do what you want with your own property. The only time that then changes is if that's spilling over into you're violating someone else's property rights now, or you're violating the freedom of someone else around you, right? So that's always this balance, especially in local government, is where is that line, right? And I tend to always err on the side of the individual and the property owner, more so than I do the community aspect of it. But there is a balance there that we have to find, especially here at the local level. But it's vital that that's a priority.
I think you just said it, it's a balance. You give the benefit of the doubt to the individual, not the collective. That is so key. But, and again, it's at the local level. And that's where
Right.
we're at. The best way we can do things is here locally. The state doesn't know what's best for St. George. The state doesn't know what's best for, what's happening, up in Lehigh or whatnot, so critical. And I appreciate that. So here's another question for you. How do you feel about the public-private partnerships?
I'm not a big fan. They're a big buzzword, right? Everyone loves the public-private partnerships. This is just amazing and rosy and flowery, and everybody loves it, right? At least that's what I hear a lot down here.
Yeah.
But I believe that government needs to stay out of as much as they can as possible. Why not? Let's just be a business-friendly, low tax, low government in your business environment, and let businesses naturally be attracted to come here rather than getting our greedy little hands into all of these partnerships. And, ultimately then we end up puppeteering it and pulling the strings as the government, but, kind of under this guise of, oh, we're partnering, right? So in general, I'm not a big fan. I just think government needs to stay out of it. We've got a big project down here, Tech Ridge, which I think Tech Ridge is cool. It's awesome that we're promoting, technology here, more jobs, high paying. That's awesome. Why do we have to be in it as government though? Why don't we just let, the private sector who, the guy who's over it, he's awesome. Like, let him do his thing. We don't need to be in there micromanaging it as government. So that's kind of my take on the private public partnerships.
I love it. I agree. One thing that I see though is it's like you said, it's a buzzword. It's fascism. When you basically have the private corporations and government in bed with one another, it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
And basically all it is monopolies for that business. They drive everybody else out of the business, and then there's favoritism going on.
Yeah,
And
picking winners and losers.
Yep, that's exactly what they're doing. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that people have got to get out of that mindset of that public private partnerships are such a winner, because they're not. They're temporarily they look good.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one thing our society likes to do is instant gratification. We instantly it looks great. When our grass is brown and we go and decide that we want to paint our grass green, hey, on the surface instantly it looks great, but when that
Yep.
paint wears off, not only do we have brown grass, but maybe we have something worse now than before. So it's just kind of a masking agent for the
Yeah.
time being, is how I can see it. um how do you feel about smart cities?
Again, also not a huge fan. I think when we look at this, and again, I'm all for the private sector, in general, like do what you want to do as a private sector. Let the free market drive it. If there's a demand in the free market, they want this smart city, okay, you've got the right to do that. But as far as government trying to come in fact, we're seeing this big push through our university down here, which is usually the culprit of a lot of these ideologies being spread throughout the community. And we have a provost at our university down here who literally dedicated a convocation speech this last year to discussing not about how important higher education is or how we can strengthen these principles that make America great. No, it was actually all about how we need to focus on the 17 United Nations initiatives, and we need to become a collective for social justice in our community. And the instructors not only need to pick one of these 17 United Nations initiatives to teach in their classroom, but to then take out and spread throughout the community. And so when you look at these underlying factions that are just being spread, I think that's ultimately the underlying issue when it comes to some of these things.
Wow, I did not know was I mean, you know, universities do seem like that they're kind of the driving force in the local communities, that the rural communities. So that is so, I cannot believe, they're talking about the United Nations and supporting the United Nations. We've got to get away from that. So I mean, again, I mean, what are your thoughts on the United Nations since you brought it up? I mean, that is definitely a good question.
Yeah, I'm not a globalist. I am very pro America. I am very pro individualism, not collectivism. I believe in God's plan, not Satan's plan. So, at the end of the day, I do. I think it's evil. They make it sound very, very flowery, like everything else. Oh, how great, world peace, da 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 da. But at the end of the day, it's all about stripping individualism. And if we don't have that, what do we have?
They
Yeah.
put on this good front and tell you all these flowery words, and people, and that's another thing. Their words and our words are not always the same, and they're con men.
Mm-hmm.
They use this, and then they get, it would be interesting to see if these people that are in the local communities are just saying this, or they're just a mouthpiece and they really believe what is being said, or if they're a player and they know, hey, this really isn't good for the community, but this is good for me. I will, it will help me. It seems like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and what we're doing is we're getting rid of the middle class, and the middle class is what has helped
Yep.
America become strong. And if you get rid of that through the destruction of property and the individualism, then what we're going to do is we're going to end up with the rich and the poor, and that sounds like the feudal system that that has been constant through the world history, and we don't want a feudal
Yeah.
system. So that's why America, and the values, the founding values the original intent of the founding fathers and the founding of their country is so vital for us to get on track, because we've gone off track. And I think that that's why, with you being, seeing and hearing from you is so critical, and hope, and the viewers will be able to get strength knowing that they're not the only ones. I think that that's one thing that happens, is that we feel so isolated, and we feel lonely, and we feel like we're the only ones that are out there. And I think that we've got to get it out there, like you said, like we talked about, getting more organized local.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I do think that a lot of people do see really what's going on, but then on the flip side, we do have a lot of well-intended idiots out there, frankly, who see the rose color of what they're presenting in front of you, of, the United Nations, take that for instance, and they go along with it. Because, I literally just had this debate with a liberal friend of mine the other day. Can you believe that I still have liberal friends? But
I think it's great. I'm glad. Yeah.
No, I know. I love it, honestly, because that's how we grow, is by having this discourse, not just all the time being in an echo chamber, right? And so I'm having this back and forth with this liberal friend of mine who's supportive of we were talking about the United Nations. And he's like, but, as a Christian, that's what we're taught, is we have to take care of everyone. I said, yes, but forced charity is not charity. In fact, that is stripping our right away to be charitable and to be Christ-like by government coming in and forcing it and taking it away, and the forced redistribution of wealth. That is the very definition of Satan's plan. And so it was interesting having that dialogue with him. He's a great, well-intended person, but simply just isn't seeing it for what it really is.
Well, I think that what happens is you take compassion away from it. When the government takes over, people are like, oh, somebody else is doing it, so I don't have to have compassion. I don't have to go look for it. I don't have to, because when you see the suffering that has happened to people, it works on you. I mean, you feel bad. I mean, and all of a sudden you have to start to have empathy, and it hurts. And it hurts to see that. And sometimes by allowing government to take that, we're like, we're circumventing that. Government, somebody else is doing it, But I like what you say about, talking about, having liberal friends, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is we're thinking right and wrong instead of left and right. We don't want to think, Republican versus Democrat. We want to look at every issue, take a microscope to it, and see what the benefits are, or the drawbacks are, for the individual, for the community, for our property, for the founding of what we stand for. So I think it's great, and I hope we want that dialogue to happen. I get frustrated when we divide up into camps, and you're in this camp, and I can't talk to you, and I'm like, well, I mean, I want to be able to communicate with everybody and on issues. Let's boil every issue down. Let's get to the foundation of every issue. Let's get to the cause and effect of every issue. And even if it takes a little bit, let's take the mask off and see if it's poison, that it's slow poison, or if it's something that will actually help us short term and long term. Or sometimes we have to have the pain now, but in the long term, it'll help us. Another quick question. I know you're going to have to be going in a few. What's happening to our families?
This is a great question, and something that's been on my mind and heart a lot lately, especially over the last 6 months or so. And really what we're seeing, and again, this is kind of back to the frog and the boiling pot, right? I mean, the family is the fundamental unit of society. That is how we grow, right? That is how we progress, is this family unit. And what we're seeing throughout, especially the last 10 years, is this attempt by a certain fraction of society to flip this construct of the family. We are seeing a full-on attack on the family, whether that be gender, you no longer need a gender, or you're born in the wrong body. Whether that be we're going to actually destroy your ability to reproduce by mutilating your body rather than treating a mental health disorder. We're going to just completely take away your ability to ever reproduce and procreate. To just the fact of having a mother and father in the home, so that's really what I see as being the number one issue actually in society right now, is this full-on assault on our children, on taking away the innocence of our children and sexualizing children and taking away the importance of the construct of the traditional family unit.
I love it. I totally agree with you. I mean, I've been seeing it, as when I started as as a police officer, I saw the destruction of the family, and it's coming from multiple angles. And and so the best thing for us to do is we've got to understand what's going on in the world. And then I think that the best for me that I found is the best thing we can do is we've got to work on ourselves. We've got to become more character ethic driven. We've got to become more principle based. We've got to become more moral based. We've got to actually start understanding what virtue means and start to live it in our own lives. And then, it will kind of go sprout out into our families, and then hopefully into our community. So again, it starts with the individual and it always ends with the individual. And I think that
100%.
I think that the families, like you said, they're vital, they're key, because it's the next generation. If we don't teach the next generation correct principles, then how are they going to they're going to be distorted, have cognitive distortions going on. They won't know the truth, they won't know the reality. They won't know how to boil problems down. They don't know how to critical think. They don't know how to really see the issues as is. So I think that there's just multiple issues like you're talking about. Real quick, maybe two more questions. What legacy would you like to leave?
Ooh, this is a great question.
I love great
I
questions.
mean, it is, yeah. Because at the end of the day, really for me, it actually circles back to being a mother, wife and mother. But I mean, as a parent, I think anyone who's a parent can relate to just how important it is that we are passing these principles down to our children. So, I mean, really, if I could be known for anything, it would be that I am instilling correct principles into my children and doing everything within my power to create an environment that is conducive for that. And, like you were mentioning earlier, it's the next generation that's going to be, carrying this on and carrying on this legacy. And what good are we if we are not protecting them? That should be like our number one thing we are doing right now, is looking at what is happening to our children, because from the corruption in our public school systems to the things that are being permitted to go on in our public squares in front of children, it's just unreal, back to the speaking of healthy elementary children and the mental health disorders that we're not addressing. That really is, at the end of the day, I'm a mama bear and I will go down fighting for my cubs.
I love it. And I think you're totally right. I think this is so critical, because if you, like you said, you're a mama bear and you're going to go down fighting, but if you're fighting for the wrong principles versus the correct principles, it can lead us down the wrong road. And and that's what's so critical and so important. And I've enjoyed this interview because I think that our views You know, I think with defending Utah, just the community in large, Utah, I mean, and those that are seeing what's happening, our views are definitely lining up, and hopefully, you know, the answers will continue to come to us. And that, because, you know, we want peace. We want love. You know, I don't like I don't like fighting. I mean, I don't like tension, you know, but unfortunately, you know, it's one of those things that in order to tell the truth, there's going to be a little bit of tension, but it's on the other person's to interpret it and to see it. Hey, they're offending me on purpose, or they're trying to help me. You know, it depends on their mindset. You know, is there any specific issue, or if anybody would like to get a hold of you, would you like that? I mean, any specific issues or anything that closing remarks that you would like to say before we close up?
Yeah, I will just say in regards to one of your earlier points as well is, you know, none of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes, and we're all just kind of trying to figure this life out, right? But at the end of the day, we were all put on this earth at this time in history for a divine purpose. And it is vital that we are looking within ourselves right now. We are looking to God, or whoever, our higher power, whoever you want to believe that is, and asking, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing right now? Because one person can make such a huge impact and a huge ripple effect, you know, like the pebble in the pond, right? All of those ripples we see that can happen from that one person, and we might not even realize, you know. It's like, I look back over now the last 3 years, and you know, I've made a ton of mistakes. I'm still learning, obviously, but I look back at things and people I've been connected with that it was divine. There's no doubt in my mind. It completely kicked me out for a minute. Where did it cut off?
Okay, so you were talking about, you know, the divine and being able to have purpose, and that being so critical.
Yeah. So essentially, that would just be my closing remark or call to action would be to look within ourselves, figure out what that calling is. We all have different talents and are going to play different roles in this important time that we're at in history right now. But don't think for a second, just because you're one person, that you're not going to make a huge impact. And don't be afraid to be called the crazy person, or to be, you know, worried about you're offending someone. Because when I look back at history, at every single hero of mine throughout history, every single one of those heroes were called crazy, had their names flung through the mud, went through horrible trials. But at the end of the day, what they accomplished is, I mean, that's why they're our heroes today, because they were willing to put themselves out there and accept that higher calling that they were supposed to do here on this earth. And that would be my call to action, is that we just get involved, especially at our local levels, hold our elected officials accountable. Maybe you're supposed to run for office, maybe you're not, maybe you have a different role, but that would be my call to action at the end of the day, is to look within. As you were saying, it starts within ourselves, then within our homes, and that spills over into our communities.
Yeah, great. I mean, you know, we can see why you're definitely a true defender. I mean, you know, it does. I think that coming from you, and you definitely have done your homework. You definitely understand, you know, the true values and the principles of our founding. We appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll have you on again. We've enjoyed
Anytime.
your words of wisdom. So anyway, we'll let you get back to you know, I know you got an appointment you got to go to. So anyway, but thank you again, and you have a great
Thank
day. Okay?
you.
Keep up the good work, and
Appreciate it.
we'll keep into contact. Okay.
Okay,
Thank
you
you.
keep it up as well. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Goodbye.